Mother Bear was stuck in the car. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sunshine filtered through the dense pine trees surrounding the Dawson family cabin. 8-month-old Noah Dawson had just woken up from his morning nap, his bright blue eyes taking in the dancing light patterns on his wooden crib. Outside, birds chirped their cheerful songs while a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. It was a perfect summer day in the mountains of Colorado, peaceful and serene. Noah's mother, Olivia Dawson, had stepped out to collect some herbs from their small garden behind the cabin. His father, Daniel, was checking the generator at the side of the house. Neither realized the danger that was slowly unfolding just 15 yards from their front porch. The family's blue SUV sat parked beneath a towering pine tree, its driver's side door slightly ajar. Daniel had returned from the local store an hour earlier, his arms full of groceries. In his rush to help Olivia prepare lunch, he had forgotten to close the car door properly. The sweet scent of blueberry muffins they had purchased lingered in the vehicle, carried by the warm summer breeze across the clearing. In the nearby woods, a mother bear and her young cub had been foraging for berries. The scent of those blueberry muffins proved too tempting for the hungry mother bear. Cautiously, she approached the cabin, her nose twitching as she followed the enticing aroma. Her small cub remained at the edge of the forest, hidden among the bushes, watching its mother with curious eyes. The bear reached the SUV and sniffed around the open door. Finding no immediate threat, she hoisted her massive body into the driver's seat, her powerful frame squeezing through the opening as she searched for the source of the delicious smell. Her sharp claws clicked against the center console as she explored the unfamiliar territory. Inside the cabin, Noah had managed to pull himself up in his crib. Though only 8 months old, he was remarkably alert and strong for his age. His attention was drawn to the window that faced the driveway where the SUV was parked. Something about the movement outside captured his interest. He babbled softly, his tiny hands gripping the crib railing as he watched the large brown shape disappear into the car. Across the gravel road, the Campbell family had just arrived at their vacation cabin. 12-year-old Zoe Campbell was the first to notice the strange sight of a bear climbing into the Dawsons' vehicle. "Mom! Dad, look!" she called out, pointing toward the SUV. Her parents, Eleanor and Martin Campbell, turned just in time to see the bear's hindquarters vanishing into the car. "Oh my goodness," Eleanor whispered, reaching for her phone. "Should we call someone?" Martin held up his hand. "Wait, let's see what happens. Maybe she'll just grab whatever food is in there and leave." But fate had other plans. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, catching the car door and slamming it shut with a loud bang that echoed through the peaceful mountain setting. The trapped bear immediately reacted with panic, thrashing inside the vehicle, her powerful body rocking the SUV back and forth as she fought to escape. Noah's eyes widened at the commotion. Unlike most babies who might cry at such a disturbance, he seemed fascinated, tilting his head as if trying to understand what was happening. The rhythmic rocking of the car and the muffled roars of the frightened bear held him spellbound. Outside, the bear's cub began to whimper, taking a few tentative steps out of the forest's edge. The sound of its mother's distress calls made the young animal pace anxiously, torn between fear of the human dwellings and concern for its mother. Olivia, still in the garden, heard the commotion and straightened up, soil still clinging to her gardening gloves. "Daniel?" she called out, alarm creeping into her voice. "What's that noise?" Daniel emerged from the side of the cabin, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I don't know," he replied, his brow furrowed in confusion. Neither of them could see the SUV from their positions, blocked as it was by the cabin's corner. Inside, Noah had somehow managed to lower the side of his crib, a trick he had never performed before. With determination unusual for an infant his age, he slid down to the floor and began to crawl toward the cabin door, which had been left open to let in the fresh mountain air. Something about the sounds from outside pulled him forward, an inexplicable connection to the distress he sensed. The bear continued to thrash inside the vehicle, her powerful paws leaving deep scratches on the upholstery and dashboard. The windows fogged with her panicked breath as she roared and snarled, desperately seeking escape. Each impact of her body against the doors made the SUV rock violently, the suspension creaking under the strain. Across the road, Martin Campbell had decided to take action. "I'm going to call the ranger station," he announced, reaching for his phone. "This is getting dangerous." Eleanor nodded, keeping her eyes fixed on the rocking vehicle. "That poor animal must be terrified," she murmured. Then her gaze shifted to the Dawsons' cabin, and she gasped, "Martin, look, there's a baby!" Noah had managed to crawl out onto the cabin's front porch, his tiny hands and knees moving with surprising speed across the wooden planks. His eyes remained fixed on the rocking SUV, drawn to it by some mysterious force that overrode any fear he might have felt. Behind him, the cabin door remained open, the sounds of his parents' distant voices barely audible over the bear's frantic roars. The sun beat down on the clearing as Noah reached the edge of the porch. For a moment he sat there, babbling softly as if talking to the frightened animal inside the car. Then, with newfound determination, he lowered himself down the single step and began crawling across the gravel driveway toward the violently rocking SUV. Eleanor Campbell couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "The baby is heading straight for the car." Martin dropped his phone, his face paling. "I'm going over there," he said, already moving toward the road. Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Wait. The bear could break out any second. You could be putting yourself in danger, too." "We can't just watch a baby crawl toward a trapped bear," Martin argued, his voice rising with tension. While the Campbells debated their next move, Noah continued his determined journey across the gravel. The sharp stones didn't seem to bother him as he moved with surprising speed for an infant. His blue eyes remained fixed on the vehicle, almost as if he could sense the fear radiating from inside. The bear's cub had ventured a few more steps from the forest, its small dark eyes watching both its trapped mother and the approaching human baby with equal measures of curiosity and fear. Inside the SUV, the mother bear had momentarily exhausted herself. She panted heavily. Her massive body slumped against the driver's side door. The windows were completely fogged now, with long scratch marks visible through the condensation. For a brief moment, the vehicle stopped rocking, creating an eerie calm before the inevitable storm. Olivia Dawson had finished gathering herbs and was heading back to the cabin, her basket full of fragrant rosemary and thyme. As she rounded the corner, the sight before her made her blood freeze in her veins. There was her baby, halfway across the driveway, crawling directly toward their SUV, which was visibly damaged, rocking slightly with something large moving inside. "Noah!" she screamed, dropping her basket, herbs scattering across the ground. "Daniel! Daniel!" Her voice carried across the clearing, high-pitched with terror. Daniel emerged from the side of the cabin just as Olivia began running toward their son. His eyes widened in horror as he took in the scene. Noah on the ground, the rocking SUV, and the small bear cub at the forest's edge. Years of working as a wildlife photographer had taught him enough to immediately understand what was happening. "Olivia, stop!" he called out, his voice commanding enough to make his wife pause momentarily. "Don't run. You'll frighten the bear more, and the cub is watching." Slow movements. Torn between maternal instinct and the logic of her husband's warning, Olivia slowed to a careful walk, her body trembling with fear for her child. Every fiber of her being screamed to rush to Noah, to snatch him away from danger, but she knew Daniel was right. Sudden movements could make everything worse. Noah, oblivious to his parents' terror, had reached the SUV. The vehicle towered above his tiny form as he sat back on his diapered bottom, looking up at the foggy windows with fascination. Inside, the bear seemed to sense the new presence. Her thrashing stopped, and a curious snuffling sound came from within the vehicle. Eleanor Campbell had overcome her initial shock and was now recording the scene on her phone, her hands shaking. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered to her daughter Zoe, who stood frozen beside her. "Mom, we have to do something," Zoe pleaded, her young face etched with concern. Martin had paused at the edge of their property, assessing the situation. With the appearance of Noah's parents and the bear cub's proximity, the danger had multiplied. One wrong move could trigger disaster. As Daniel and Olivia inched closer to their son, a new sound cut through the tense atmosphere, the wail of sirens in the distance. Someone, perhaps another neighbor, had called emergency services. "Your son has been given something rare and precious. A connection to the natural world that most humans have forgotten is possible. Here, in this place, that gift can flourish. Elsewhere, it may diminish. But we can always return," Daniel said, thinking aloud, "for summers, for holidays, to maintain the connection even if we live primarily in the city." "Yes," Joseph agreed. "The bond has been formed. Distance may weaken it, but it cannot be broken entirely." Olivia's expression was troubled. "I worry about Noah growing up with this responsibility, the burden of being different, of having a gift that others might not understand or accept." Joseph's weathered face creased in a gentle smile. "All parents worry about their children's differences, whether those differences are visible to others or hidden in the heart. But consider this. Your son found joy today, not burden. He found belonging, not isolation. Perhaps what seems like responsibility to you is purpose to him." As they talked into the night, weighing options and considering possibilities, a soft sound drew their attention to the window. Outside, illuminated by moonlight, the mother bear stood at the edge of the yard, watching the cabin with calm attention. She was alone this time, her cub presumably waiting safely in the forest. For several minutes she remained perfectly still, as if standing guard. Then she rose onto her hind legs, her powerful silhouette stark against the night sky, and made a sound that carried clearly through the glass. Not a roar or a growl, but something that seemed very much like a promise. When she disappeared back into the darkness, Daniel and Olivia looked at each other, a decision crystallizing between them without words needing to be spoken. "We're staying," Daniel said simply, reaching for his wife's hand. Olivia nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "Noah belongs here, and so do we, at least for now." Joseph smiled, satisfaction evident in his ancient eyes. "The bears will watch over him," he said, "and he over them. The old ways are not lost after all." In the nursery, Noah slept peacefully. the wooden bear carving now placed safely on a shelf above his crib. In his dreams, he wandered through sun-dappled forests alongside furry companions, understanding perfectly the language of rustling leaves and rumbling growls, of flowing water and silent starlight. He was too young to know that what he experienced was extraordinary, too innocent to recognize the gift he carried as anything but natural. But as he grew in the years to come, under the watchful eyes of both human guardians and wild protectors, Noah Dawson would learn to bridge worlds that had grown too far apart, the realm of human knowledge and the kingdom of primal wisdom, the civilization of words and the wilderness of wordless truth. And in that bridging, perhaps, lay hope not just for one special child and his bear companions, but for all who had forgotten how to listen to the earth's most ancient voices. For now, though, he slept. One small miracle among many in a world where bears could be saved by babies, and babies could speak the forgotten language of bears. The approaching noise caused the bear cub to dart back into the forest, disappearing among the trees. The reaction inside the SUV was immediate and violent. The mother bear, hearing the sirens and no longer sensing her cub nearby, renewed her efforts to escape with frenzied intensity. The entire vehicle rocked dangerously, tilting on its suspension as the massive animal hurled herself against the doors and windows. Noah, still sitting beside the car, showed no fear. Instead, he reached up one tiny hand toward the door handle, which was bouncing with each impact from within. Daniel and Olivia were still 15 feet away, moving as quickly as they dared without running. "Noah, stay still, baby," Olivia called, trying to keep her voice calm despite her racing heart. "Mommy's coming." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The bear lunged against the driver's side door with tremendous force. The same door that had been left slightly ajar earlier and had blown shut. The impact hit the latch mechanism just right, and the door popped open an inch before the weight of the bear slammed it shut again. Noah babbled excitedly, reaching his hand higher, tiny fingers stretching toward the door handle that had momentarily moved. The next time the bear slammed against it, his fingers brushed the metal. "No!" Daniel shouted, unable to maintain his calm. He lunged forward just as the bear crashed against the door again. This time, Noah's small fingers hooked the handle, pulling it downward just as the bear's weight hit the door. The mechanism released with a click that seemed unnaturally loud in the morning air. The door burst open with explosive force, and 400 pounds of terrified black bear spilled out onto the gravel, mere inches from the sitting baby. Olivia screamed. Daniel froze mid-stride. The Campbells across the road watched in horror, certain they were about to witness a tragedy. But in that crucial moment something remarkable happened. The bear, disoriented from her panicked thrashing and sudden freedom, locked eyes with Noah. The baby, instead of crying or showing fear, giggled, a pure, innocent sound that cut through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. The massive bear paused, her breath coming in heavy pants, muscles tensed for flight. For 3 heartbeats, she stared at the small human child who had somehow facilitated her escape. Noah reached out a chubby hand toward the bear's snout, babbling as if greeting an old friend. To everyone's astonishment, the bear did not strike. She sniffed once at the baby's extended hand, then backed away, her movement surprisingly gentle for such a large animal. With one last look at Noah, she turned and lumbered toward the forest where her cub waited. Daniel reached Noah first, scooping him up in trembling arms and backing away from the retreating bear. Olivia collapsed against them both, tears streaming down her face as she checked her son for injuries. The sirens grew louder as a forest ranger's truck pulled into the clearing, followed by a police cruiser. The bear had already disappeared into the tree line, reunited with her anxious cub. "Are you all right? Is the child hurt?" called Ranger Mike Thornton as he emerged from his vehicle, tranquilizer gun at the ready. "He's fine," Daniel replied, his voice shaking with residual fear and dawning amazement. "He's completely fine." The ranger surveyed the scene. The damaged SUV with its door hanging open, the bear paw prints in the dust, the shaken family huddled together. "What in the world happened here?" he asked, holstering his weapon. Before anyone could answer, a soft rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. At first, everyone thought it was thunder from a sudden mountain storm, but the sky remained clear blue, without a cloud in sight. The rumble came again, stronger this time, causing small pebbles to dance across the gravel driveway. The ranger's expression changed from confusion to concern. "Everyone get in your vehicles now," he ordered, his voice tense with new urgency. "What is it?" asked Martin Campbell, who had crossed the road to check on the Dawsons. "Landslide," the ranger replied grimly, pointing toward the mountain ridge above them. "The spring thaw and recent rains have destabilized the slope. We've been monitoring it, but—" Another rumble cut him off, and this time they could see it. A section of the mountainside above the forest beginning to shift and slide. The area where the bear and her cub had just disappeared. Noah began to cry for the first time that morning, his small face crumpling as he pointed toward the forest. The adults exchanged bewildered glances, but in their rush to reach safety, no one except Zoe Campbell noticed how the baby seemed to be trying to tell them something. Something about the bears that had just vanished into the now endangered forest. "Everyone to the vehicles now!" Ranger Thornton shouted over Noah's increasing wails. "The eastern evacuation route is still clear. Follow me down to the ranger station." Daniel clutched Noah tightly to his chest while Olivia grabbed the diaper bag from the porch. The Campbells rushed back to their SUV, Martin helping Eleanor and Zoe inside before jumping into the driver's seat. As they prepared to follow the ranger's truck, Zoe looked back at the Dawsons' cabin one last time. "Dad, wait," she called out. "Look at that baby." Noah was thrashing in his father's arms, his cries growing more desperate as Daniel tried to secure him in his car seat. The infant's arms reached toward the forest with such insistence that Daniel was struggling to buckle the straps. "He's just frightened by all the commotion," Martin said, turning the key in the ignition. "Poor little guy." But Zoe wasn't convinced. At 12 years old, she had spent most of her life around her younger cousins and the children her mother babysat. She knew the difference between a scared cry and something else. Noah's desperation seemed purposeful. "It's like he's trying to tell them something," she murmured, watching through the rear window as the Dawsons finally managed to get into their second vehicle, a red pickup truck parked beside the damaged SUV. The rumbling grew louder, and a distant crack echoed through the valley as the first trees began to fall on the upper slope. Ranger Thornton's truck pulled away, lights flashing, and the Campbell family followed close behind. In the rearview mirror, Martin could see the Dawsons' pickup bringing up the rear of their small evacuation convoy. Inside the pickup, Noah had reached a level of distress that neither parent had ever witnessed before. His face was red, tears streaming down his cheeks as he strained against the car seat straps, his eyes fixed on the forest they were leaving behind. "I don't understand," Olivia said, trying to comfort her son by stroking his hair. "He's never acted like this before." Daniel focused on the winding mountain road, following the taillights of the Campbell's vehicle. "He's had a traumatic morning, Liv. First the bear, now all this rushing and noise." But as they rounded a curve that would take them out of sight of their cabin and the forest beyond, Noah's cries suddenly changed to words, or what sounded remarkably like words. Baby, he sobbed, still reaching backward. Baby. Olivia and Daniel exchanged shocked glances. At 8 months old, Noah hadn't spoken any recognizable words yet. They had been expecting Mama or Dada to be his first. Did he just say baby? Olivia whispered, her eyes wide. The realization hit Daniel with such force that he nearly missed the next curve. The cub, he said. He's trying to tell us about the bear cub. The convoy had reached a viewpoint turnout where several other vehicles from neighboring cabins had already gathered. Ranger Thornton was out of his truck, coordinating with 2 additional rangers who had arrived on scene. Daniel pulled in behind the Campbells and turned to his wife. Liv, I think Noah is worried about the bears. Olivia shook her head in disbelief. That's impossible, Daniel. He's a baby himself. He can't possibly understand. You saw how he was with the mother bear. Daniel interrupted. That wasn't normal. No baby should have been that calm face-to-face with a wild animal. As if to confirm his father's words, Noah had stopped crying and was now making grabbing motions toward Daniel's jacket pocket, where he kept his binoculars when photographing wildlife. With trembling hands, Daniel retrieved the compact binoculars and, almost automatically, lifted them to his eyes. From their elevated position at the viewpoint, he could see the entire valley, including the advancing landslide that was now carrying trees and boulders down the mountainside. "Oh my God," he murmured, adjusting the focus. "What is it?" Olivia asked, trying to soothe Noah, who had renewed his attempts to free himself from the car seat. "The bears," Daniel said, his voice tight. "They're trapped. There's a ravine between them and safe ground, and the landslide is pushing them toward it." He handed the binoculars to Olivia, who peered through them while keeping one hand on Noah. Through the lenses, she could make out the mother bear and her cub, frantically pacing along the edge of a steep drop-off as earth and debris tumbled toward them from above. "Can they climb down?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "It's too steep, and there's a river at the bottom. They'll be swept away." Noah whimpered, as if understanding every word, his blue eyes fixed on his father's face with an intensity that was unsettling in one so young. Outside, Ranger Thornton was addressing the gathered evacuees. "The landslide appears to be contained to the northeastern slope for now. We've got geologists monitoring the situation, and emergency services are setting up at the base of the mountain. Everyone needs to stay here or proceed to the designated evacuation center in town." Daniel stepped out of the truck, approaching the ranger with determination. "Mike, there are 2 bears caught between the slide and the Anderson ravine, a mother and cub." The ranger's expression was sympathetic but firm. "I understand your concern, Daniel, but wildlife rescue isn't our priority right now. We need to ensure all humans are safe first." "But they'll die," Daniel insisted. "The ravine is at least 80 feet deep with the spring runoff at the bottom." "I'm sorry," Ranger Thornton said, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "There's nothing we can do. The area is too unstable for us to approach." From inside the pickup, Olivia watched her husband's shoulders slump in defeat. Noah had gone suspiciously quiet, and when she turned to check on him, she was startled to find him watching the exchange between his father and the ranger with an expression that seemed far too knowing for his age. "What is going on with you today?" she whispered, stroking his cheek. Noah turned those piercing blue eyes to her face, and for a moment, Olivia had the strangest sensation that she was looking into the eyes of someone much older than her infant son. When Daniel returned to the truck, his face was grim. "They won't help. Say it's too dangerous." "Maybe they're right," Olivia said gently. "Daniel, we've just had one brush with death today. I can't bear the thought of you putting yourself at risk, too." Daniel didn't respond, his gaze distant as he watched the continuing destruction on the mountainside. Noah began making urgent noises again, straining toward his father. "Bebe," he repeated, more insistently this time. "Bebe." A knock on the window startled both parents. Zoe Campbell stood outside, her young face serious. Daniel rolled down the window. "Mr. Dawson," she said without preamble, "I think your baby is trying to tell you something about the bears. I've been watching him, and it's not normal baby behavior." Daniel and Olivia exchanged glances. Coming from a child, the observation somehow carried more weight. "I think so too," Daniel admitted. "My dad has climbing gear in our car," Zoe continued. "He does search and rescue volunteer work. And I heard what you told the ranger about the bears being trapped." Daniel looked past Zoe to where Martin Campbell was deep in conversation with Ranger Thornton, gesturing toward the mountain with animated movements. "What are you suggesting?" Olivia asked, a note of alarm in her voice. Zoe's expression was earnest. "I don't know exactly, but if Noah cares this much about those bears, maybe we should try to help them." As if on cue, a collective gasp rose from the gathered evacuees. Daniel looked up to see a massive section of the mountainside give way, sending a fresh wave of debris cascading toward the trapped bears. Noah screamed, a sound so full of anguish that it sent chills down everyone's spines. Without thinking, Daniel was out of the truck, running toward Martin Campbell. "Martin, your climbing gear, can I borrow it?" Martin broke off his conversation with the ranger, looking surprised. "What for?" "There are bears trapped by the landslide, a mother and cub. I think I can help them, but I need equipment." Ranger Thornton stepped between them. "Absolutely not, Daniel. I forbid it. That area is extremely dangerous right now." "With all due respect, Mike," Daniel replied, his voice steady, "you don't have the authority to forbid me anything. This is public land." A tense silence fell between the two men. Finally, Martin spoke up. "I'm coming with you," he said. "Two have a better chance than one, and I've got technical rescue training." The ranger threw up his hands in frustration. "This is insane. You're risking your lives for wild animals that would maul you given half a chance." "Maybe," Daniel conceded, "but I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try." As the men argued, no one noticed Olivia removing Noah from his car seat and carrying him to a better vantage point where they could see the trapped bears more clearly. No one except Zoe, who followed quietly. "You really think he understands what's happening?" Olivia asked the girl softly. Zoe nodded. "I've never seen a baby act this way. It's like he has some connection to them." Noah had calmed in his mother's arms, his eyes fixed on the distant figures of the bears. The mother bear was now standing protectively over her cub as the landslide continued to push them closer to the ravine's edge. "Daniel thinks it has something to do with how Noah helped free the mother from our car," Olivia said, almost to herself. "Like they formed some kind of bond in that moment." Zoe considered this. "My mom says animals can sense things about people that we don't understand ourselves. Maybe the bear recognized something special in Noah." Olivia looked down at her son, who was now watching his father and Martin unload climbing gear from the Campbell's vehicle, defying the ranger's continued objections. "Maybe," she whispered, "or maybe Noah recognized something in her." A sudden commotion from the gathered evacuees drew their attention. A news helicopter had appeared, circling above the landslide area. The downdraft from its rotors sent loose debris scattering, and the noise clearly agitated the already terrified bears. "That's going to make things worse," Zoe said, frowning. "The bears are already scared." As if hearing the girl's words, the mother bear made a decision. With the helicopter above, the landslide behind, and the ravine ahead, she chose the only option that might save her cub. To everyone's horror, she began to guide the young bear toward the steep slope of the ravine, apparently attempting to find a way down. "No," Olivia gasped. "It's too steep." Noah began to squirm in her arms, his face contorted with what could only be described as fear for the bears. He pointed toward the ravine, making urgent noises that seemed to convey his distress. Daniel and Martin had seen it too. They exchanged a quick look, then grabbed the climbing gear and raced toward Daniel's truck. "We'll take my pickup," Daniel called to Olivia as they approached. "It can handle the off-road route better." "I'm coming with you," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Eleanor Campbell standing there, her expression determined. "Absolutely not," Martin replied, loading ropes into the truck bed. "I was a veterinarian before I decided to stay home with Zoe," Eleanor said firmly. "If those bears are injured or need to be tranquilized, you'll need me." A tense moment passed as Martin and Eleanor locked eyes. Finally, Martin nodded. "Fine, but you stay in the truck until we secure the scene." Ranger Thornton made one last attempt to stop them. "This is a reckless endangerment of human life. I could have you all arrested." "Then do it," Daniel said simply. "After we save those bears." The ranger stared at him for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "At least take a radio," he said, handing over his spare. "Channel 3 for emergency services." As the small rescue party prepared to depart, Olivia approached the truck with Noah still in her arms. "Be careful," she told Daniel, her voice tight with worry. "Come back to us." Daniel leaned in to kiss her, then touched Noah's cheek. "I will. Take care of our little bear whisperer." Noah reached out to touch his father's face, and once again, that strange look of awareness passed across his infant features. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine, not entirely unpleasant, but definitely unsettling. "I'll bring them back safe," he promised his son, though he wasn't entirely sure why he phrased it that way. As Daniel climbed into the driver's seat, Martin beside him and Eleanor in the back, Olivia stepped away from the truck. Noah immediately began to fuss, reaching toward the vehicle with obvious distress. "Shh, baby," Olivia soothed. "Daddy will be back soon." But Noah wasn't reaching for his father. His small hands were making grabbing motions toward Eleanor's medical bag, which sat on her lap in the back seat. Zoe, ever observant, noticed immediately. "Mrs. Dawson," she said, tugging at Olivia's sleeve. "I think Noah wants something from that bag." Eleanor, hearing this, opened her medical kit. What could he possibly want from here? Noah's cries grew more insistent, his little body practically lunging from his mother's arms toward the truck. "Wait," Olivia said, stepping closer to the vehicle again. "Show him what's in there." Somewhat bewildered, Eleanor began removing items from her veterinary bag, holding each one up where Noah could see it. Stethoscope, bandages, antiseptic wipes. Nothing seemed to be what the baby was looking for. Then she pulled out a small dart gun and several tranquilizer darts. Noah immediately went silent, his eyes fixed on the tranquilizer equipment. "That's impossible," Eleanor whispered. "How could he possibly know what this is for?" Daniel stared at his son, a cold feeling washing over him. "Liv, has he been watching nature documentaries or something?" Olivia shook her head slowly. "No, nothing like that. He's too young for TV." The adults exchanged uneasy glances, while Noah continued to stare at the tranquilizer gun. His earlier distress completely vanished. "Take it," Olivia said finally. "If you need to sedate the bears to move them safely, take it." Eleanor nodded, returning the equipment to her bag. "We will," As the truck pulled away, navigating around the ranger's blockade onto a narrow Forest Service road, Olivia stood with Noah in her arms, Zoe beside them. The three watched until the vehicle disappeared among the trees. "Do you really think they can save those bears?" Zoe asked quietly. Olivia looked down at Noah, who was now strangely calm, his eyes still fixed on the spot where the truck had vanished. "I don't know," she replied honestly, "but I think Noah believes they can." A distant rumble signaled another section of the mountainside giving way. The gathered evacuees murmured anxiously, and Ranger Thornton spoke urgently into his radio. Above them, the news helicopter continued to circle, its camera likely capturing dramatic footage for the evening broadcast. None of them noticed the elderly Native American man who had been watching the entire scene unfold from the edge of the gathering. He stood apart from the others, his weathered face impassive as he studied Olivia and Noah with eyes that missed nothing. Only when the baby suddenly turned to look directly at him did the old man's expression change, a flash of recognition crossing his features before he melted back into the crowd. Meanwhile, Daniel drove the pickup as close to the landslide area as he dared, using his knowledge of the terrain to find a relatively stable approach. The rumbling had subsided temporarily, but all three rescuers knew it could resume at any moment. "There," Martin said, pointing through the windshield. "I can see them." Sure enough, the mother bear and her cub were visible about 200 yards ahead, now precariously close to the ravine's edge. The larger animal stood protectively over her offspring, occasionally swatting away debris that tumbled toward them. "The landslide has pushed them right to the brink," Eleanor observed, reaching for her binoculars. "They have nowhere left to go." Daniel parked the truck behind a large boulder that offered some protection should the slide worsen. "What's our plan?" Martin was already unloading the climbing gear. "We need to create a safe passage for them away from the edge. See that ridge to the south? If we can guide them there, they'll have a clear route down the mountain." "And how exactly do we guide two terrified bears?" Eleanor asked, checking her tranquilizer equipment. "Very carefully," Daniel replied, reaching for a rope. "I've worked with wildlife photographers for years. Bears typically avoid humans. If we position ourselves right, we can use our presence to steer them toward safety without direct confrontation." A harsh cry from above drew their attention to the news helicopter, which had spotted their truck and was now hovering lower for a better view. "That thing is going to ruin everything," Daniel muttered. "The noise will keep the bears from hearing or smelling us until we're too close." As if to prove his point, the helicopter dipped even lower, its camera clearly visible through the side door. The mother bear reared up on her hind legs, roaring at the mechanical intruder, while her cub cowered behind her. "We need to move now," Martin urged, handing Daniel a climbing harness. "That helicopter is pushing them closer to the edge." Eleanor grabbed her medical bag and followed the men as they made their way carefully across the unstable ground. The going was treacherous, with loose rocks shifting beneath their feet and occasional small rivulets of earth sliding downhill. Above them, the scarred mountainside loomed ominously, while below, the bears continued their standoff with the helicopter. "If that pilot doesn't back off, someone's going to get killed," Daniel said through gritted teeth. "Us, or the bears?" Eleanor pulled out her phone. "I know someone at Channel 8 News. Let me see if I can get them to call off their vultures." While she made the call, Daniel and Martin continued to work their way down the slope, setting pythons and running safety lines between them. The plan was to create a human barrier that would guide the bears away from the ravine and toward the safer southern ridge. Eleanor caught up to them a few minutes later, slightly breathless. "They're calling the helicopter back. Apparently, Our unauthorized rescue mission is now the bigger story." Sure enough, the helicopter was gaining altitude, its downdraft no longer agitating the debris around the bears. The mother bear dropped back to all fours, still watchful but no longer in an aggressive posture. "Okay," Daniel said, securing his harness to a sturdy tree root. "Now we need to make our presence known, but not threatening. Eleanor, stay back with the tranquilizers in case things go wrong." The veterinarian nodded, preparing a dart with practiced efficiency. "Adult female black bear, roughly 300 pounds," she murmured, measuring the dosage. "Cub, approximately 60 pounds. Got it." Daniel and Martin began to move in a wide arc, deliberately letting their boots dislodge small stones to alert the bears to their presence. The mother's head swung around immediately, her keen nose testing the air. "Easy," Daniel called softly, not to the humans, but to the bear. "Easy, Mama. We're here to help." The bear's eyes locked on him, and for a moment Daniel felt a jolt of recognition. The same penetrating gaze she had given Noah earlier that morning. There was intelligence there, and something else he couldn't quite name. "She remembers me," Daniel whispered almost to himself. "From the cabin, she knows we're connected to Noah." Martin shot him a skeptical glance but kept moving along their planned route. "Just stay focused. Animals are unpredictable when they're scared." The mother bear huffed loudly, her front paw pawing at the ground as she assessed these human intruders. Her cub peeked out from behind her, curiosity momentarily overriding fear. For several tense seconds nobody moved. Not the humans, not the bears, not even the loose stones on the unstable slope. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, from above, came the faint but distinct sound of Noah crying. Despite the distance, the noise carried clearly in the mountain air. The mother bear's ears immediately pricked up, and she turned her head toward the sound. "That's impossible," Eleanor murmured from her position behind them. "We're at least half a mile from the viewpoint. How can we hear a baby crying from here?" But Daniel wasn't questioning the mystery of acoustics at that moment. He was transfixed by the bear's reaction to his son's cries. The massive animal had gone completely still, her head tilted as if listening intently. The cub, sensing its mother's change in demeanor, also stopped fidgeting. Noah's cries continued, rising and falling in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. And then, to the human's astonishment, the mother bear responded with a low, rumbling vocalization, not a growl of threat, but something softer, almost like a call. "She's answering him," Daniel breathed, scarcely believing what he was witnessing. Martin gripped his arm tightly. "Daniel, this is beyond weird. What the hell is happening?" Before Daniel could respond, the ground beneath them gave a warning shudder. Small rivulets of dirt and stone began trickling down the slope, signaling that the landslide was reactivating. "We're out of time," Eleanor called urgently. The whole slope could go any minute. The bears sensed the danger too. The mother nudged her cub, trying to guide it away from the increasingly unstable ground near the ravine. But with each step they took, more earth crumbled beneath their paws, forcing them back toward the dangerous edge. "They're trapped," Martin said grimly. "We can't guide them out. There's no stable path left." Daniel's mind raced, calculating angles and distances. "We need to create a bridge," he said suddenly. "Martin, did you bring the portable climbing ladder?" Martin nodded, comprehension dawning. "In the truck. But Daniel, even expanded to its full 20 feet, it won't span the entire unstable section. We'll anchor it on our side and extend it as far as possible," Daniel explained, already moving back toward the vehicle. "It might give them enough stable ground to reach safety." As the men hurried to retrieve the equipment, Eleanor kept her position, tranquilizer gun at the ready. The bear and her cub had retreated to a small outcropping of rock that provided temporary stability, but it was clear that even this refuge wouldn't last long. "Hang on," Eleanor called to them, knowing they couldn't understand her words, but hoping her calm tone might provide some reassurance. "Help is coming." Back at the viewpoint, Olivia and Zoe watched with mounting anxiety as the rescue attempt unfolded in the distance. Noah had been crying inconsolably, straining toward the landslide area with such determination that Olivia's arms ached from restraining him. "I don't understand what's gotten into him," she said, bouncing the baby gently in a futile attempt to calm him. Zoe, who had been watching through the Campbell's binoculars, suddenly gasped. "Mrs. Dawson, look! The bear is responding to Noah's cries." Olivia adjusted her grip on Noah to take the offered binoculars. Through the lenses, she could see the mother bear's head tilted upward, ears forward, clearly reacting to a sound coming from their direction. That's not possible," she whispered. But the evidence was right before her eyes. A small crowd had gathered around them, other evacuees drawn by Noah's unusual behavior and the drama unfolding on the mountainside. Among them, the elderly Native American man moved closer, his weathered face solemn as he observed the interaction between the infant and the distant bears. Ranger Thornton pushed through the crowd, his expression a mix of concern and irritation. "What's happening down there? I've got the fire department and animal control standing by, but I need to know what your husband is planning." Before Olivia could answer, the old man spoke, his voice soft but carrying a natural authority that made everyone turn to look at him. "The child speaks to her," he said simply, "and she listens." Ranger Thornton frowned. "What are you talking about, sir?" The old man gestured toward Noah, who had momentarily stopped crying and was watching the elderly stranger with unusual intensity. "This child has the old connection," the man continued. "What our people call Wanikia Wawokie, the animal helper spirit. It is rare now, but not unknown." The crowd murmured, some dismissive, others curious. Olivia found herself strangely affected by the old man's words, as if they had awakened some dormant understanding within her. "You mean Noah can communicate with the bears?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The old man nodded slowly. "Not with words as we know them, but in the old way, the way that existed before words, the language of life that all creatures once shared." Ranger Thornton made a skeptical noise, but Zoe stepped forward, her young face earnest. "I believe it," she said firmly. "I've been watching him all morning. He knew exactly what was happening with those bears. He knew they needed help." Noah burbled suddenly, reaching toward the old man with both hands. To everyone's surprise, the elderly man approached and gently touched the baby's outstretched fingers. "Ah," he said softly, a smile creasing his weathered face. "You are an old soul, little one. Very old indeed." Olivia felt a strange shiver run through her, not unpleasant but distinctly otherworldly. "Who are you?" she asked. "Joseph Standing Bear," the old man replied. "I am an elder of the Ute people. These mountains have been our home for countless generations." He looked from Noah to the distant scene of the rescue attempt, his expression growing concerned. "The mother bear recognized the spirit in your son this morning. That is why she did not harm him. But now she and her cub are in great danger, and the connection between them is causing your son distress. Can you help?" Olivia asked, surprising herself with the question. 2 hours ago, she would have dismissed such talk as superstition. Now, after everything she had witnessed, she found herself willing to consider possibilities beyond her understanding. Joseph considered her question carefully. Perhaps, but we must act quickly. The spirits of the mountain are restless today. The earth moves not just from natural causes, but because something is out of balance. Down on the slope, Daniel and Martin had returned with the collapsible ladder and were working frantically to secure it across the unstable section of ground. The rumbling had intensified, with larger chunks of earth breaking free around them. "This isn't going to hold our weight," Martin warned as they extended the aluminum structure to its full length. "It doesn't need to," Daniel replied, driving a piton deep into a relatively stable section of ground. "It just needs to give the bears a way across." Eleanor had moved to a new position, keeping the bears in sight while staying clear of the increasingly dangerous slope. "How do we get them to use it?" "They'll see it as a trap." Daniel paused, the same question weighing on his mind. The mother bear was watching their every move with wary intelligence, clearly understanding that these humans were attempting something but unsure whether to trust their intentions. "We need Noah," he said suddenly, the realization striking him with absolute clarity. Something about him connects with her. If he were here— "That's insane," Martin interrupted. "You want to bring your baby into this death trap?" Before Daniel could defend his admittedly irrational thought, his radio crackled to life. Ranger Thornton's voice came through, distorted by static. "Dawson, do you copy?" "We've got a situation up here." Daniel grabbed the radio. "What kind of situation?" "Is everyone all right?" There was a pause. Then Thornton's voice returned, sounding distinctly uncomfortable. "There's an elder from the Ute tribe here, Joseph Standing Bear. He says your son has some kind of spiritual connection to those bears, and he wants to try something." Martin and Eleanor exchanged incredulous glances, but Daniel felt a strange sense of confirmation rather than surprise. "What does he want to do?" he asked. "He wants to perform some kind of ceremony with your son," Thornton replied, skepticism evident in his tone. "Says it might help calm the bears and guide them to safety. Your wife is considering it, but I wanted to check with you first." Daniel looked up at the mother bear, remembering the moment earlier that morning when she and Noah had locked eyes, that inexplicable instant of connection that had saved his son's life. "Put Olivia on," he requested. A moment later, his wife's voice came through the radio. "Daniel? What's happening down there?" "The bears are trapped, Liv. We've rigged a makeshift bridge, but we can't get them to use it. They're too frightened." He hesitated, then asked, "Do you really think Noah has some kind of connection with them?" Olivia's voice was steady when she replied, "After what I've seen today? Yes, I do. And Elder Standing Bear seems to understand it. He wants to try a ceremony, something to help Noah focus this, whatever it is he has. He says it might calm the bears enough for them to follow your guidance." Daniel took a deep breath. As a wildlife photographer, he had spent years observing animal behavior, documenting the complex intelligence of creatures many humans dismissed as operating purely on instinct. He had seen things that defied conventional explanation, moments of apparent understanding between species that shouldn't have been possible. "Okay," he said finally. "If you think it's safe for Noah, then let's try it." "I'll stay right with him," Olivia promised. "The elder says the ceremony can be performed from here, at a safe distance." While they had been talking, the situation on the slope had deteriorated further. A large section of earth gave way just 20 feet from the bear's position, sending a cascade of dirt and stones into the ravine below. The mother bear roared in alarm, gathering her cub closer with one massive paw. "Whatever you're going to do it fast," Martin urged, securing the last anchor for their makeshift bridge. This whole hillside is coming down. Up at the viewpoint, Joseph's standing bear had created a small cleared area, placing stones in a circle formation. He gestured for Olivia to bring Noah to the center. "Your son already knows what to do," the elder explained as she hesitantly complied. "I will simply help him focus his energy and intent." Olivia sat cross-legged in the circle, Noah on her lap. The baby had gone surprisingly quiet, his blue eyes fixed on the distant figures of the bears. Around them, evacuees and emergency personnel watched with expressions ranging from skepticism to awe. Ranger Thornton stood nearby, radio in hand, ready to relay any developments to the rescue team below. Joseph began to sing softly, a melodic chant in his native language that seemed to rise and fall with the mountain breeze. As he sang, he gently placed a small object in Noah's palm, a carved wooden bear, worn smooth with age. "This belonged to my grandfather," the elder explained during a pause in his chanting. "He too had the gift of animal speaking. It will help your son focus his thoughts." Noah examined the carving with unusual concentration for an infant, his tiny fingers tracing the smooth curves. Then, to everyone's amazement, he raised the wooden bear toward the mountain and made a sound. Not a typical baby babble, but a sustained vocalization that rose and fell in a pattern eerily similar to Joseph's chant. Down on the slope, the mother bear's head snapped up, her attention suddenly and completely focused on the viewpoint. She made a rumbling sound deep in her throat, not threatening, but questioning. "She hears him," Eleanor whispered, lowering the tranquilizer gun. "My God, she actually hears him." Noah continued his strange vocalization, now rocking slightly back and forth in Olivia's lap. Joseph's chanting grew more intense, his weathered hands making flowing gestures toward the mountain. The mother bear took a tentative step forward, then another, her cub following close behind. Their path would take them directly to the makeshift bridge Daniel and Martin had constructed. "It's working," Daniel breathed, watching through his binoculars. "She's bringing the cub toward the ladder." But just as hope began to rise, disaster struck. A deafening crack split the air as a massive section of the mountainside directly above the bears gave way. Tons of earth, rock, and uprooted trees began to slide toward them in a deadly wave. "No!" Daniel shouted, instinctively starting forward despite knowing he could never reach them in time. Martin grabbed him, holding him back from certain death. "Daniel, stop! There's nothing you can do." At the viewpoint, Noah suddenly screamed. Not a cry of fear or pain, but a sound that carried such authority that every adult present felt it like a physical force. Joseph Standing Bear's chanting reached a crescendo, his arms outstretched toward the mountain. What happened next would later be debated endlessly by witnesses, some claiming natural causes, others divine intervention, and still others the power of an ancient connection between species that modern humans had forgotten. The landslide, which should have engulfed the bears completely, seemed to part around the small outcropping where they stood. Like water flowing around a stone in a river, the deadly cascade split and rejoined, leaving the mother and the cub untouched on their small island of stability. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the mountain seemed to hold its breath. Then Noah made another sound, softer this time, almost a cooing. The mother bear responded immediately, nudging her cub toward the aluminum ladder that spanned the unstable ground. With careful steps, she guided her offspring onto the man-made bridge, testing each section before allowing the smaller bear to follow. Daniel, Martin, and Eleanor watched in awe as the bears made their way across the ladder, paws delicately placed on the aluminum rungs. When they reached the stable ground on the far side, the mother bear paused and looked directly at the humans who had created her escape route. Back away slowly, Daniel instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. Give them space to reach the southern ridge. The three rescuers retreated step by step, creating a clear path toward safety. The mother bear watched them for a long moment, then guided her cub in exactly that direction, moving with purpose now rather than panic. At the viewpoint, Noah had gone completely silent, the wooden carving clutched tightly in his small hand. Joseph's standing bear smiled, nodding as if confirming something he had already known. The balance is restored, he said softly to Olivia. Your son has done a great thing today. Olivia looked down at Noah, who was now watching the distant bears with what appeared to be satisfaction. I don't understand any of this, she admitted. How can a baby possibly have this kind of connection? Joseph's weathered face creased in a gentle smile. Children are closer to the old ways than adults. They have not yet learned to doubt, to dismiss the connections that bind all living things. Your son's spirit is especially attuned to these connections. It is a gift, but also a responsibility. Will he always have this ability? Olivia asked, not sure whether to hope for a yes or a no. That depends on many things, Joseph replied. On how he is raised, on whether the gift is honored or dismissed, on the choices he makes as he grows. Down on the mountain, the bears had reached the southern ridge and were making their way to a forested area untouched by the landslide. Daniel radioed up to the viewpoint. They're safe, he reported, relief evident in his voice. Heading into the eastern forest now, we're coming back up. A cheer went up from the gathered crowd. Ranger Thornton shook his head in disbelief, but even he couldn't suppress a smile. I've been working these mountains for 20 years, he muttered. Never seen anything like this. As the excitement swirled around them, Noah began to show signs of exhaustion, his eyelids drooping as the tension of the day caught up with his small body. Olivia cradled him close, overwhelmed with relief and lingering astonishment at what had transpired. Thank you, she said to Joseph, who was carefully retrieving the stones from his improvised ceremonial circle. Will you tell us more about this gift Noah seems to have? Help us understand what it means? The elder nodded slowly. If you wish. The old knowledge should not be lost, especially not when it appears so strongly in one so young. He glanced at the wooden carving still clutched in Noah's now sleeping hand. Let him keep that for now. It has found its new guardian. As the rescue team made their way back up the mountain, the landslide finally stabilized. A new equilibrium established in the scarred landscape. Nature would heal the wound in time, just as the humans would gradually process the extraordinary events of the day. But for Noah Dawson, sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms, something fundamental had shifted. A door had opened that could never fully close again, a connection to something ancient and profound that would shape his life in ways none of them could yet imagine. The mother bear and her cub disappeared into the dense forest, leaving behind a story that would be told and retold in the mountain community for generations to come. A story about a baby who spoke to bears, and bears who listened. Back at the Dawson cabin, several hours later, Daniel carefully parked their second vehicle beside the damaged SUV that had started the whole extraordinary chain of events. The family had been cleared to return home once geologists confirmed that their property was not at risk from further landslides. Olivia carried the still sleeping Noah inside, gently placing him in his crib. The wooden bear carving remained clutched in his tiny fist, and she made no attempt to remove it. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching his son sleep with a mixture of wonder, pride, and something close to reverence. What do we do now, Liv? He asked softly. How do we raise a child who can do what he did today? Olivia touched the carved bear in Noah's hand. "I think we start by listening to Joseph Standing Bear. He's coming for dinner tomorrow. He says there are things we should know, traditions we should understand." Daniel nodded slowly. His scientific mind still struggled to rationalize what he had witnessed, but there was no denying the evidence of his own eyes. Whatever had happened between Noah and the bears defied conventional explanation. "Do you think we should tell people?" he asked. "About what Noah can do?" Olivia considered the question carefully. "Not yet," she decided. "The world isn't always kind to those who are different. Let's give him time to grow into this gift, whatever it is, time to understand it himself before others try to define it for him." Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, a bear's roar echoed through the valley, not threatening, but strong and clear, like a farewell call. Noah stirred in his sleep, a small smile touching his lips, as if he understood the message carried on the evening breeze. Daniel slipped his arm around his wife's waist. "Our little bear whisperer," he murmured, the nickname no longer feeling like a joke, but a recognition of something profound. As darkness settled over the cabin, the wooden carving in Noah's hand seemed to glow softly in the fading light. A bridge between worlds, a token of an ancient connection rediscovered in the most unexpected of circumstances. A connection that had saved lives today, both human and animal. A connection that would shape the future of one special child and all who loved him. In the forest, miles away, the mother bear settled into a den with her cub, safe from the dangers they had narrowly escaped. As sleep began to claim her, an image formed in her mind of a small human with wise eyes and an understanding beyond his years. A human who had spoken in the old language, the language before words. A human she would never forget. 3 months passed since that extraordinary day on the mountain. Autumn painted the Colorado wilderness in fiery hues of amber and crimson, and the Dawson cabin was snug against the approaching chill of winter. Noah had grown noticeably in that short time, not just physically but in ways that both fascinated and concerned his parents. The wooden bear carving from Joseph Standing Bear remained Noah's constant companion. He would cry inconsolably if anyone tried to take it away, clutching it with surprising strength for a child now just shy of 1 year old. More remarkable were the changes in his development. Noah was already attempting to stand unassisted, his blue eyes tracking movements with an awareness that pediatrician Dr. Melissa Hayes had called exceptionally advanced. "I've never seen cognitive development like this in an 11-month-old," she had told Olivia during Noah's most recent checkup. "His spatial awareness and focus are more typical of a child twice his age." What Dr. Hayes didn't know, what Olivia and Daniel had chosen not to share, were the other unusual behaviors. Noah would sometimes stop whatever he was doing and turn his head toward the forest, listening to sounds no one else could hear. On several occasions they'd found small gifts outside their cabin door in the morning. A perfectly arranged circle of pine cones, a cluster of late-blooming wildflowers placed with deliberate care. The game cameras Daniel had installed captured nothing but ordinary forest wildlife, yet the offerings continued to appear. Joseph Standing Bear had become a regular visitor to the Dawson home, teaching them about Ute traditions and the history of animal speakers in his culture. Daniel, initially skeptical despite what he had witnessed, had gradually opened himself to the elders' wisdom. "In the old days," Joseph explained one evening as they sat around the fireplace, "children with the gift were recognized early and trained by tribal elders. They became bridges between human communities and the animal world, ensuring harmony and balance." Olivia cradled Noah, who was unusually still, his eyes fixed on Joseph as if understanding every word. And now? How many others are there like Noah? Joseph's weathered face grew solemn. Very few. The modern world drowns out the old connections. Children are taught to dismiss what they cannot explain, to reject what science cannot measure. The gift becomes dormant, forgotten. But not with Noah, Daniel said, watching as his son traced the wooden bear carving with his small fingers. No, not with Noah, Joseph agreed. His connection is too strong to be silenced. That is both a blessing and a challenge. That night, after Joseph had departed and Noah was finally asleep, Daniel and Olivia sat at their kitchen table, mugs of tea growing cold between them as they discussed what was becoming increasingly obvious. "We can't stay here indefinitely," Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "My sabbatical from the university ends in January. They're expecting me back in the photography department for the spring semester." Olivia nodded, her face troubled. "But how can we take him back to Denver now? He's connected to this place, to the forest, to the wildlife here, especially to—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Though neither had seen the mother bear and her cub since the day of the landslide, there were signs that the animals remained in the vicinity. Park rangers had reported sightings of a female black bear with a growing cub in the Eastern Forest Preserve, an area that butted up against the mountain ridge behind the Dawson property. "Joseph says the connection works across distances," Daniel reminded her, "but that it weakens with separation. I don't know what that would mean for Noah." They were interrupted by a sound from the baby monitor. Not Noah's typical nighttime fussing, but the same odd vocalization he had made during the bear rescue. Olivia and Daniel exchanged alarmed glances before rushing to the nursery. Noah was standing in his crib, fully upright with one hand gripping the railing and the other clutching the wooden bear. His eyes were wide open but unfocused, and the strange calling sound continued to emerge from his throat, a sound no human child should be able to make. "Noah? Sweetie?" Olivia approached cautiously. When she touched his arm, the boy didn't respond, continuing to stare out the window toward the dark forest beyond. Daniel moved to the window, peering out into the night. The motion-activated security lights illuminated the yard and the edge of the tree line, but nothing moved in the pools of artificial brightness. Then he saw it, a pair of eyes reflecting the light from the darkness beyond. Then another, smaller pair beside the first. "Liv," he whispered, not moving from the window. "They're here." Olivia joined him, Noah still making the calling sound in his crib. At the forest's edge stood the mother bear and her cub, now considerably larger than when they'd last seen him. The bears made no attempt to approach the cabin, simply standing at the boundary between wilderness and human domain, their eyes fixed on the nursery window. "What do they want?" Olivia whispered, instinctively tightening her hold on Noah. As if in answer, the mother bear rose onto her hind legs, not in threat, but in what almost appeared to be a gesture of respect or acknowledgement. The cub remained on all fours, bouncing slightly with youthful energy despite the late hour. Noah's vocalization changed, becoming softer, almost like a lullaby. His tiny body relaxed in Olivia's arms, and a smile spread across his face as he recognized the visitors. "Bebe," he said clearly, pointing to the cub. Then, with equal clarity, "Mama?" Daniel and Olivia exchanged stunned glances. These were Noah's first unmistakable words, not Dada or Mama, as they might have expected, but names for the bears who had become entangled in their son's unusual destiny. The mother bear dropped back to all fours, gave one last look toward the nursery window, then nudged her cub back into the forest. Within seconds, they had vanished into the darkness, leaving no evidence of their visit but paw prints in the soft earth near the tree line. Noah yawned, suddenly a normal, tired baby again. Olivia laid him back in his crib, and he curled up around the wooden carving, asleep almost instantly. "They came to say goodbye," Daniel said softly as they left the nursery. "They must be moving to winter territory." Olivia nodded, tears unexpectedly stinging her eyes. How does he understand all this? He's not even a year old. Before Daniel could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming text. He frowned at the screen. "It's from Martin Campbell. He says to turn on the news right away." They moved to the living room, and Daniel switched on the television, quickly finding the local news channel. A somber-faced reporter stood in front of what appeared to be a government building, snow falling around her. "Marks the third such incident this month," she was saying. Officials from the Department of Wildlife Management have confirmed that the tranquilized bear was euthanized after displaying what they termed abnormal interest in human habitation. Conservation groups are protesting what they call a shoot-first policy. The screen showed footage of a black bear being loaded into a large truck, clearly sedated. Daniel increased the volume. Sources within the department have referenced a controversial new study suggesting that certain bear populations are developing problematic associations with humans, particularly in areas with increased vacation home development. Dr. Victor Reichman, head of the Bear Behavior Research Unit, has advocated for more aggressive management of bears that show any signs of comfort around human settlements. The report cut to a clip of a stern-faced man in a laboratory coat. "What we're seeing is a dangerous evolution in bear behavior," Dr. Reichman stated, his voice clipped and authoritative. "Bears that lose their natural fear of humans pose a significant public safety risk. Our predictive models suggest that tolerating such behavioral anomalies could lead to a 300% increase in dangerous human-bear encounters over the next decade." Olivia sank onto the couch, one hand over her mouth. "Oh God, Daniel. If anyone saw those bears near our cabin..." Daniel was already reaching for his phone. "I'm calling Mike Thornton. He'll know more about what's happening." The conversation with Ranger Thornton was brief but informative. A new wildlife management policy had indeed been implemented across 3 counties, including theirs. Bears exhibiting habituation to human presence were being systematically removed from the population. "It's that bastard Reichman," Thornton said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "He's been pushing this agenda for years, and now he's finally got the ear of the state government. Claims he can identify problem bears before they become dangerous." "The mother and cub from the landslide?" Daniel asked, dreading the answer. "Are they on his list?" There was a pause before Thornton replied. "They've been tagged as subjects of interest because of their unusual behavior that day. Several of the evacuees filed reports about how the bears acted, especially around your son. Reichman's team has been asking questions." After ending the call, Daniel relayed the information to Olivia. Her face paled as she understood the implications. "They'll kill them for being different," she whispered, "for having a connection with Noah." "Not if we can prevent it," Daniel replied, his mind already formulating a plan. "But we need to act quickly, and we need help." The next morning dawned clear and cold, the first real taste of winter in the air. Daniel was already awake when Olivia came into the kitchen, Noah babbling happily in her arms. "I called Joseph," he told her without preamble. "He's bringing his grandson Ryan. He works with the Wilderness Conservation Coalition and has contacts in the Tribal Wildlife Authority. They might be able to help us establish a protected status for these bears." Olivia nodded, settling Noah into his high chair. "What can I do?" "Start gathering everything we have from that day. Photos, videos, witness statements. We need to build a case that these bears are special, that they demonstrated extraordinary intelligence and restraint, not aggression. For the next several hours, they worked feverishly. Olivia reached out to the Campbells and other evacuees who had witnessed the events, asking for written statements about what they had seen. Many were happy to help, having been moved by the unusual bond between Noah and the bears. Daniel meticulously organized the material, creating a compelling narrative of exceptional animal behavior rather than dangerous habituation. By noon, they had assembled a substantial portfolio of evidence. Joseph arrived with his grandson shortly after lunch. Ryan Standing Bear was in his early 30s, with his grandfather's dignified features softened by youth. He wore the uniform of the Tribal Natural Resources Department and carried himself with professional confidence. "Grandfather has told me everything," he said after introductions. "I've been monitoring Dr. Reichman's activities for months. What he calls a scientific management is nothing more than systematic elimination of bears that don't fit his behavioral models." "Can you help us protect them?" Olivia asked, bouncing Noah on her hip. The baby was unusually quiet, studying Ryan with solemn interest. Ryan reviewed the materials they had prepared. "This is good, but it might not be enough. Reichman has political support, and his department has broad discretionary powers." He hesitated, then added, "There is one possibility. If we could have these specific bears designated as culturally significant to the Ute tribe under the Indigenous Cultural Heritage Protection Act, it would supersede the state's Wildlife Management Authority." "Can you do that?" Daniel asked, hope rising. "It's not simple," Ryan admitted. "We would need to demonstrate an established cultural connection between these specific bears and tribal tradition, and we would need the full support of the tribal council." Joseph, who had been sitting quietly by the fire, spoke up. "The council will listen when I tell them about the child with Waniakia Wawokie, but words alone may not be enough. They will want to see." "See what?" Olivia asked, though she already suspected the answer. "The connection," Joseph replied simply, "between Noah and the bears." Daniel exchanged a look with Olivia, both understanding what this meant. They would need to facilitate another encounter, a controlled, documented interaction that would convince the tribal council of the special relationship between their son and these wild animals. "Is that even possible?" Daniel wondered aloud. "The bears have moved to their winter territory. We don't know where they are." Noah, who had been quietly playing with his wooden carving, suddenly looked up. "Bebe," he said clearly, pointing toward the eastern forest. "Bebe, come." All 4 adults stared at the child, whose simple declaration carried such certainty that none could doubt him. "Tomorrow," Joseph decided, rising from his chair with surprising agility for his age. "We will prepare tonight and meet the bears tomorrow. I will call the council members who can travel here on short notice." As Joseph and Ryan prepared to leave, making plans for the next day's critical meeting, a black SUV with government plates turned into the cabin's driveway. Daniel tensed as he recognized the Department of Wildlife Management logo on the vehicle's door. "We have company," he said quietly to Ryan. "Official company." Ryan straightened his tribal officer's uniform. "Let me handle this. As a representative of the tribal authority, I have standing to inquire about their activities in an area adjacent to treaty lands." The man who emerged from the SUV was immediately recognizable from the news footage, Dr. Victor Reichman himself, accompanied by 2 uniformed wildlife officers. His gaze swept over the cabin and the assembled group on the porch with clinical detachment. "Good afternoon," he called, approaching with measured steps. "I'm Dr. Reichman from the Department of Wildlife Management. Am I addressing the Dawson family?" Daniel stepped forward. "I'm Daniel Dawson, This is my wife, Olivia, and our son, Noah. Can we help you with something, Dr. Reichman? The scientist offered a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. I believe you can. We're conducting follow-up research on the incident from 3 months ago involving a female black bear and her cub. I understand your family had close contact with these animals. Before Daniel could respond, Ryan moved to stand beside him. Dr. Reichman, I'm Officer Ryan Standing Bear with the Ute Tribal Natural Resources Department. May I ask what specific interest the state has in wildlife that may fall under tribal protection? Reichman's smile disappeared, his expression hardening. These animals are not on reservation land, Officer Standing Bear. They fall under state jurisdiction. The borders of our authority extend to culturally significant wildlife regardless of their exact location, Ryan countered smoothly. We have reason to believe these particular bears may qualify under that designation. Joseph had remained seated, observing the exchange with calm dignity. Now he rose and joined the younger men. I am Elder Joseph Standing Bear. The bears you seek have significance in our traditions. Pursuing them would be an infringement on our cultural rights. Reichman's eyes narrowed as he assessed this new complication. I wasn't aware of any cultural designation for specific bear specimens in this region. Do you have documentation of this claim? We are preparing it now, Ryan replied. In the meantime, we request that you suspend any management actions regarding these animals until the Tribal Council has completed its review. The standoff was interrupted by Noah, who had been watching the exchange with unusual focus. He suddenly began making the distinctive vocalization they had heard before, the sound that seemed to call to the bears. All heads turned toward the child. Reichman's expression shifted from irritation to intense scientific curiosity. Fascinating, he murmured, studying Noah as one might examine a laboratory specimen. The reports mentioned unusual vocalization from the infant. I had dismissed it as exaggeration. Olivia pulled Noah closer protectively, disturbed by the clinical interest in the scientist's gaze. Dr. Reichman, Daniel said firmly, whatever research you are conducting, my son is not part of it. He's a child, not a test subject. Reichman seemed barely to hear him, his attention fixed on Noah. The development of interspecies communication skills in pre-verbal humans is an understudied field. The implications for evolutionary biology could be significant. He pulled out a small recording device. Would you mind if I captured some audio samples of the child's vocalizations? I absolutely mind, Olivia snapped, retreating a step. You have no right to record our son. The tense moment was broken by the crackle of the wildlife officers' radios. One of them stepped aside to answer, then approached Reichman with urgency. Sir, we've got a ping from the tracking collars. Bears matching the description have been detected moving in this direction. Estimated arrival within the hour. Reichman's face lit with excitement. Perfect timing. Prepare the tranquilizer equipment. I want both specimens brought in for detailed behavioral assessment. What happens after your assessment? Daniel demanded, already knowing the answer. Reichman's clinical detachment returned. That depends on the results. If they demonstrate the behavioral anomalies we suspect, humane euthanasia would be the responsible course of action. Their brain tissue would provide valuable data on the neurological basis of their unusual behavior. Olivia gasped, and Noah began to cry, not his normal infant wail, but a sound of distress that seemed to carry through the forest like a warning. Ryan stepped forward, placing himself physically between Reichman's team and the forest. I must formally object to any attempt to capture or harm these animals. The Ute Tribal Authority is asserting a cultural protection claim effective immediately. You have no jurisdiction here, Reichman countered coldly. My department has full authority to manage wildlife threats as we see fit. These bears are not a threat, Daniel insisted. They've shown remarkable restraint and intelligence. They saved my son's life. Reichman's expression was pitying. Mr. Dawson, with all due respect, you're anthropomorphizing wild animals based on an emotionally charged experience. These bears displayed highly abnormal behavior, approaching human habitation and responding to human stimuli in unpredictable ways. That makes them dangerous, regardless of your personal feelings about them. The wildlife officers began unloading equipment from their vehicle, tranquilizer rifles, tracking devices, and what appeared to be transport cages. The situation was escalating rapidly, with Reichman clearly determined to capture the approaching bears. Joseph's standing bear had been observing silently. Now he closed his eyes briefly, as if reaching a difficult decision. When he opened them again, there was a new resolve in his weathered face. "Ryan," he said quietly, "call Chairman Blackhawk. Tell him it is time to invoke the Treaty of Shadow Mountain." Ryan looked startled. "Grandfather, that hasn't been used in 70 years, I know," Joseph interrupted. "But it remains valid. Tell him I, as senior elder, am making the formal request." As Ryan stepped away to make the call, Reichman approached Joseph. "What exactly is this treaty you're referring to?" Joseph met his gaze steadily. In 1946, the federal government signed a special agreement with the Ute tribe, granting us exclusive wildlife management authority within a 10-mile radius of Shadow Mountain in emergency situations involving culturally significant species. This cabin sits within that radius. Reichman scoffed. "A convenient claim, but I've never heard of such an agreement." "Few have," Joseph acknowledged. "It was part of a classified settlement after certain government activities impacted sacred tribal lands during the early nuclear program. The treaty was buried in federal archives, but it was never rescinded." Ryan returned, his expression a mixture of awe and triumph. "Chairman Blackhawk has approved the invocation. He's contacting the regional federal office now to enforce the treaty provisions." Reichman's face flushed with anger. "This is absurd. You can't possibly expect—" He was interrupted by the sound of another vehicle approaching. This one, a tribal police SUV with official markings. 2 officers emerged, along with a third man in a business suit who carried a leather portfolio. "Dr. Reichman," the suited man called as he approached. "I'm Jacob Whitefeather, legal counsel for the Ute tribal nation. I've been instructed to serve you with this notice of treaty enforcement." He extended a document bearing official seals. "By authority of the Treaty of Shadow Mountain, all wildlife management activities within this zone are now under exclusive tribal jurisdiction. Your team is respectfully requested to stand down immediately." For several tense minutes, it seemed Reichman might challenge the order. The wildlife officers looked uncertainly between him and the tribal officials, awaiting direction. Finally, with obvious reluctance, Reichman took the document. "This isn't over," he said coldly. "I'll have our legal department review this supposed treaty. If it doesn't hold up to scrutiny, we'll be back, with federal support if necessary." "You do that," Ryan replied calmly. "In the meantime, these bears are under tribal protection." As Reichman and his team reluctantly packed their equipment and departed, a palpable wave of relief washed over the group gathered at the cabin, but Joseph's expression remained troubled. "We have bought time, nothing more," he warned. "The treaty will delay them, but Reichman will not give up easily. He has built his reputation on controlling what he cannot understand." Noah had calmed in Olivia's arms, his eyes fixed on the eastern forest where, according to the tracking data, The mother bear and her cub were approaching. The wooden carving in his hand seemed to glow warmly in the afternoon light. "What do we do now?" Daniel asked, watching his son with a mixture of wonder and concern. Joseph placed a weathered hand on Noah's head. "Now we prepare for tomorrow. The council members will arrive by morning. Before then, we must ensure that the bears understand what is at stake, not just for them, but for all who share their unusual gifts." "How can we possibly communicate something so complex to wild animals?" Olivia wondered aloud. Joseph smiled, gesturing toward Noah. "We already have our translator. Tonight, under the protection of darkness, your son will speak to them in the language beyond words. And with the Great Spirit's blessing, they will understand." As the sun began to set behind Shadow Mountain, casting long fingers of gold across the clearing, Noah made his strange calling sound once more. This time, from the depths of the forest came an answering call, deep, resonant, and unmistakably a response. The mother bear had heard, and she was coming. As twilight deepened into night, the Dawson cabin glowed with warmth against the encroaching darkness. Inside, Joseph's standing bear sat cross-legged on the living room floor, singing softly in his native language, while Noah watched with rapt attention from Olivia's lap. Daniel stood by the window, binoculars raised, scanning the forest's edge. "They're here," he whispered. Two dark shapes emerged from the trees, the mother bear walking with deliberate calm, her cub, now nearly half her size, trailing close behind. They paused at the clearing's edge, exactly where the security lights faded into shadow. Noah immediately began to squirm in Olivia's arms, making insistent noises and reaching toward the door. "He wants to go outside," Olivia said, her voice tight with maternal concern. Joseph stopped his singing and rose slowly to his feet. The bears will not harm him, but for what must happen next, they need to see him clearly. "You can't be suggesting we let our baby approach wild bears in the dark," Daniel protested, though his voice lacked conviction. After everything they had witnessed, the idea no longer seemed as outlandish as it should have. "Not alone," Joseph assured them. "We will all go, slowly, quietly, with respect. The mother remembers Noah as the one who freed her. She remembers you as those who helped save her cub from the landslide. There is trust, but we must honor it with proper ceremony." Ryan, who had remained near the door since the confrontation with Reichman, spoke up. "The tribal officers will maintain a perimeter. If anything seems wrong, we'll intervene immediately." After a moment of silent communication between them, Daniel and Olivia nodded. With Noah bundled warmly against the night chill, they followed Joseph onto the porch and down the steps into the yard. Ryan and the tribal officers kept a respectful distance, watchful but unobtrusive. Joseph led them to a spot about 30 feet from where the bears waited. There, he gestured for them to stop. "Now we wait for them to choose," he explained softly. "The approach must be theirs." Noah had gone completely still in Olivia's arms, his eyes fixed on the bears with an intensity that seemed impossible for one so young. The wooden carving clutched in his small hand caught the moonlight, its polished surface gleaming. For several long moments nothing happened. Then Noah made his calling sound, softer now, almost musical in the night air. The mother bear's ears pricked forward, and she took one deliberate step into the light, then another. Her cub followed, though it kept close to her flank, still cautious despite its growing size. When they were perhaps 15 feet away, the mother bear stopped again. With surprising gentleness, she nudged her cub forward, as if encouraging it to continue alone. The young bear hesitated, looking back at its mother with what could only be described as uncertainty. The mother made a soft huffing sound, and the cub turned back toward the humans. With halting steps, it approached Noah. Olivia's arms tightened instinctively around her son, but Noah remained calm, his gaze steady as the bear cub drew nearer. When it was just a few feet away, the cub sat back on its haunches and tilted its head, studying the small human with evident curiosity. Noah extended his hand, the one holding the wooden carving, toward the cub. For a breathless moment, no one moved. Then the cub leaned forward and sniffed the carving, its sensitive nose taking in the scents of wood, human, and the lingering essence of generations of handlers before Noah. What happened next would be debated, rationalized, and questioned by everyone present except Noah himself. The cub made a sound. Not a typical bear vocalization, but something that seemed to mimic the cadence and tone of Noah's call. The infant responded with a delighted laugh, then made a new sound of his own. Back and forth they went, these strange utterances passing between human child and bear cub, like a conversation in a language none of the adults could comprehend. Joseph closed his eyes, listening with an expression of profound reverence. "The old speech?" he murmured. "I have heard of it in our oldest stories, but never thought to witness it myself." After several minutes of this extraordinary exchange, Noah suddenly yawned, his small body registering the lateness of the hour despite the excitement. The bear cub, as if understanding, backed away a few steps, returning to its mother's side. The mother bear rose onto her hind legs, towering above them in the moonlight, not threatening, but magnificent in her power and presence. She gazed directly at Joseph, then at Daniel and Olivia, and finally at Noah, who had fallen asleep in his mother's arms, still clutching the wooden carving. "She understands," Joseph said softly. "They will be here tomorrow when the council arrives." With a final look at the sleeping child, the mother bear dropped back to all fours and led her cub back into the forest, disappearing into the darkness as silently as they had emerged. "What just happened?" Daniel asked, his voice hushed with wonder. Joseph's weathered face was serene in the moonlight. "Your son has done what has not been done for many generations. He has renewed the ancient covenant between his kind and theirs. Tomorrow the council will witness this renewal, and these bears will gain the protection of our people for as long as they live." That night, as Noah slept peacefully in his crib, Daniel and Olivia sat with Joseph and Ryan at the kitchen table, planning for the morning's crucial meeting. "Reichman won't give up easily," Ryan warned. "He has political supporters and scientific prestige. He'll challenge the treaty, claim jurisdiction on behalf of the state." "Let him try," Joseph replied with quiet confidence. "Some things are beyond the reach of modern bureaucracy. What the council will witness tomorrow is older than any government, any law written on paper." "And after tomorrow?" Olivia asked, the question that had been weighing on her mind finally finding voice. "What happens to Noah? To this gift he has?" Joseph's eyes were kind as he regarded the worried parents. "That will be for you to decide, and for Noah as he grows. The gift can be nurtured, or it can fade with time and distance, but it never disappears completely." "If we return to Denver?" Daniel asked. "The connection will become dormant like a sleeping seed," Joseph explained. "It might awaken again in times of need, or if Noah returns to this place. Or it might express itself in different ways. An unusual affinity for animals, perhaps, or a healer's touch." Olivia and Daniel exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the weight of the choice before them, to uproot their lives and stay in this place where Noah's extraordinary gift could flourish, or to return to the city and their established careers, allowing the connection to fade into something more compatible with modern life. Morning arrived with a crystalline clarity, the mountain air sharp with the promise of winter's approach. By 9 o'clock, a small procession of vehicles had arrived at the cabin, 7 members of the tribal council, led by Chairman Marcus Blackhawk, a dignified man in his 60s whose presence commanded immediate respect. Elder Standing Bear, the chairman greeted Joseph with a formal handclasp. It has been many years since the Treaty of Shadow Mountain was invoked. The council has come as requested. Joseph introduced the Dawson family, with special attention to Noah, who was unusually quiet and observant in Daniel's arms. The chairman studied the infant with thoughtful eyes. "This is the child with Waniikya Wawokie, the one who speaks to bears?" "He is," Joseph confirmed. "And today, with the council as witness, he will demonstrate this gift so that the bears in question may receive formal protection under our laws and traditions." The council members gathered in the clearing behind the cabin, where Joseph had prepared a ceremonial circle with sacred objects marking the cardinal directions. The Dawson family stood in the center, Noah now held by Olivia. Around the perimeter, tribal police maintained a watchful guard, alert for any sign of Reichman or state wildlife officers who might attempt to interfere. Joseph began the ceremony with prayer and purification, wafting cedar smoke around the circle while singing an ancient blessing. The council members joined in, their voices rising and falling in harmonious counterpoint to Joseph's lead. Noah, far from being frightened by the unfamiliar rituals, watched with fascination. When Joseph approached him with the smoking cedar, the baby reached out to touch the rising tendrils, gurgling with delight. "Now," Joseph said when the preliminaries were complete, "we call the bears to council." He nodded to Noah, who seemed to understand perfectly what was expected. The child made his distinctive calling sound, louder and more confident than ever before. The sound echoed across the clearing and into the forest beyond. For several long minutes, nothing happened. The council members remained respectfully silent, but Daniel could sense their growing skepticism. Chairman Blackhawk glanced at his watch, then at Joseph with a questioning expression. Just as the moment threatened to become awkward, Noah made the sound again. And this time, there was an answering call from the forest. Heads turned as the mother bear and her cub emerged from the trees, moving with unhurried dignity toward the ceremonial circle. The tribal police tensed, hands moving instinctively toward their sidearms, but Chairman Blackhawk raised a hand, commanding them to hold position. The bears approached to within about 20 feet of the circle, where they stopped, the mother sitting back on her haunches in a posture that seemed almost formal. Noah squirmed in Olivia's arms, clearly wanting to be put down. After a moment's hesitation, she lowered him gently to the ground within the circle. Joseph knelt beside him, supporting the child as he took several unsteady steps forward, the longest independent walk he had yet attempted. The council members watched in stunned silence as Noah, clutching the wooden bear carving, toddled toward the waiting bears with absolute confidence. When he was halfway between the ceremonial circle and the bears, he sat down on the grass, placed the carving before him, and made a series of sounds that resembled nothing so much as speech in an unknown language. The mother bear responded with rumbles and soft huffs, while the cub bounced slightly on its front paws, as if eager to join the exchange, but restrained by its mother's presence. For nearly 5 minutes, this extraordinary conversation continued, with Noah occasionally gesturing toward the council members and then back to the bears, as if making introductions or explaining the situation. Finally, Noah picked up the wooden carving and held it high above his head. The mother bear rose onto her hind legs, standing tall and magnificent in the morning light. A collective gasp went up from the council members, not of fear but of recognition. The posture was identical to the sacred bear depicted in the tribe's most ancient petroglyphs. "It is enough," Chairman Blackhawk said, his voice husky with emotion. I have seen what was promised in the old stories. The child speaks with the voice of ancestors. The bears hear with the ears of understanding. The covenant is real. He turned to the assembled council members. By the authority vested in me as chairman, and with the witness of this council, I hereby declare these bears to be guardians of Shadow Mountain, sacred beings under the full protection of the Ute Nation. He looked directly at Joseph. The Treaty of Shadow Mountain will be enforced with all our resources. No harm shall come to them while our people endure. As if understanding the proclamation, the mother bear dropped back to all fours and made a sound that seemed almost like acknowledgement. The cub approached Noah, touching its nose briefly to the child's outstretched hand before retreating to its mother's side. Together, the bears turned and walked unhurriedly back toward the forest, pausing once at the tree line to look back before disappearing into the wilderness. Noah watched them go with an expression of perfect contentment. When they had vanished from sight, he yawned and reached for Olivia, suddenly just a tired baby ready for his morning nap. The formalities continued throughout the day. Documents signed, declarations recorded, plans made for ongoing monitoring and protection of the newly designated sacred bears. By evening, the council had departed, leaving the Dawson family alone with Joseph and Ryan to contemplate the day's momentous events. "It's official," Ryan told them, holding up copies of the tribal declarations. "These documents have already been filed with the federal authorities. Reichman and the State Wildlife Department have been formally notified that the bears are under tribal protection. Any attempt to capture or harm them would violate federal law and treaty obligations." "Will it be enough?" Daniel asked. Ryan nodded confidently. "The chairman has assigned our best legal team to the case. And after what the council witnessed today, trust me, they'll defend these bears with everything they have." Later that night, with Noah asleep and Ryan departed for tribal headquarters, Joseph sat with Daniel and Olivia by the fire, the wooden bear carving resting on the mantel above them. "You have a decision to make," the elder said gently, "about Noah's future and your own." Daniel sighed, looking into the flames. "My sabbatical ends in January. We need to decide whether to return to Denver or stay here. The university has offered me a remote teaching position," Olivia added. "I could conduct my research from here, with occasional trips to campus, but it would mean completely changing the life we planned." Joseph nodded, understanding. The greatest gifts often come with the greatest challenges,